One of the things that we find useful with respect to self-defense training, as opposed to regular martial arts training, is occasionally putting on boxing gloves and not doing sparring, because that ingrains some bad techniques too, from a self-defense perspective, but putting on gloves and pads and then practicing the same sort of drill, except this time the person who's actually punching is really trying to smack this person in the head. But if I'm wearing a big pillow on my hand because I've got a big boxing glove on, and they have headgear on, if I actually hit them, it's not going to damage them. It will wake them up nicely though. And so this person actually gets to work on directly making sure they can step in and stop the technique. The person who's throwing it doesn't tentatively do this or sit here and move this far and then stop waiting for the block. They're actually trying to hit this person in the head. And it's a really good reality check on what's going to work and what doesn't. And the person who criticized ours first had a really good point. If this person is much bigger than that person and they're just laying in there with everything they've got, stepping in and blocking that, making them knock backwards. I still consider it high percentage, not because all the time it's going to work, but because almost all the time they won't get hit in the head. They might get knocked backwards. They might crumple backwards, but that first strike is not going to work. It is certainly true that this isn't actually the technique that I would choose to teach initially in a women's self-defense class. We happen to respond to this one merely because someone sent me the original YouTube video and I saw things that I wanted to comment on. But I wouldn't actually do this one. Oddly enough, the one I would prefer to do actually is lower percentage in terms of not getting hit, but it's actually a much higher percentage in terms of the person defending actually performing the technique. As we said before, the main problem with this particular one isn't the fact that they might still be rocked backwards. It's the fact that in a short period of time, for women's self-defense, we have to train this person, in the case of an active threat, who's swinging at her, to actually step forward into it. And that's hard to do in a short amount of time. It can be done, but it's not easy. If someone here, getting in their face, yelling things like that, and suddenly swings, most people will do this. They won't do this sort of movement. Stepping into a threat is very difficult. So while this is an effective technique, and it's fairly high percentage, getting them to do the technique in the first place is kind of problematic if you only have a short amount of time to train someone. So instead, the technique I would probably do takes advantage of the fact that people do this when they're starting. Okay? You'll notice when they do this, the shoulders come back and you're all ready to be bowled over. And so just standing here and letting the hand hit you is not where we go with this. But what we do is from here, we then shoot our arms out and hook around the arm. Now people look at it and go, how does that actually stop you from getting hit in the head? Well, your arms are in the way. You might still get clocked somewhat, but what it does do is make sure that it takes away some of the power of the blow, and it also sets up a situation where even if I get rocked backwards, I can use them for support. Okay? So if I'm standing here like this, someone actually is in my face and starts to do a punch, reflexively, I'm going to do this sort of thing. But as I do it, I'm then going to shoot my hands out. I'm not going to have to step into it, prefer to, but in most cases, if people won't step, we can at least do this sort of thing. Hands come up and out. Or punch to the head. Right? Go. Okay? Now notice, I didn't stop her arm this time. I just kind of did this. If I go like this, duck, and put my hands out, it starts to stop the movement. Now, she's going to swing much harder this time. And unfortunately, this particular version of the block doesn't hurt her arm, so she's going to have more fun punching at me. She's going to swing a lot harder. Go ahead and put your body weight into it. Watch what happens to my body when it hits me. Ready to go. I get bowled over, even by someone much smaller. But notice when I do it, my head didn't take any of it, and this is what happens next. Even if I get bowled this way, I grab the arm. This person is reflexively going to keep their balance, which means from this position, I grab, it keeps my balance, and then I can act offensively. This is not perfect by any means, but if I knew perfect technique, I'd be making millions on my self-defense. That's not how it works. But what this does is make sure that first hit won't hit me full force in the head. The wrap immediately here, because reflexively, if I start falling, I'm going to grab them. The grab reflexively means that I'm not going to lose my balance, and I'm going to help take some of theirs. As they stand up, their mind's going to go, oh, get my balance back, while I am moving in for strikes. So, in a way, it's lower percentage than this defense. She steps in the same sort of thing. I step in and drive this way. Okay? This is much higher percentage in making sure that hand is completely away from my head. Bam! Strike, movement. This version is lower percentage than that because it almost guarantees that in some way I'm going to lose my balance slightly, and part of it, if they have really long arms, may hook around and get me in the head a little bit. Where it is much higher percentage is the fact that I don't have to train anyone to step into a threat. All they have to do is what they're going to do reflexively, and grab. We put our hands up in the face of threat, we grab when we start to fall. We do this normally. So if she comes in, I do this, hook, bam, start hitting, start ease, things like that. And from a women's self-defense perspective, a technique that you're going to definitely do beats a technique that might technically be better, but that doesn't happen. So from a self-defense perspective for women, that's actually what I'd rather teach. Now, there are technical problems and things that can be critiqued on that one, but overall, it's a much better technique, in my opinion, than the prior one that I've shown, and many of the things that I've seen, because it's something that will happen, that you can train someone to do in a short amount of time. It will keep them from getting hit, and it sets up a situation where they can respond effectively. So, there's some ideas from us about women's self-defense techniques versus roundhouse punch.